Welcome to the Witches and Prose podcast. My name is Haley Camarillo, author of Fury and Flame, book one of the Witching Hour series, which will be out this October. Today I have with me Luna Laurier, the author of the upcoming book of Shadow and Moonlight. Thank you so much for being on today. I'm so excited to have you.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Haley. I'm so excited to be here right now.
I'm glad to be spending this time with you. We're going to have a lot of fun today. So can you tell us a little bit about Of Shadow and Moonlight? I love the title, by the way. It sounds amazing.
Thank you. So Of Shadow and Moonlight is a new adult paranormal fantasy romance. It is does take place in an urban setting, actually in a town called Johnstown, Pennsylvania. And I would kind of describe it as Black Dagger Brotherhood's like vampires meets kind of like a modern twist on A Court of Thorns and Roses, and kind of that whole tragic, heart-wrenching love story kind of scenario. And then with just like a dash of Greek mythology. But the story follows the main character, Cassie, who prefers to be referred to as Cass, where she is basically suffering a terminal illness that she has been dealing with her entire life, when it kind of takes a downward turn and she's basically given like a few years to live. And she kind of is at this crossroads in her life where she's like, am I just going to continue living this life of seclusion and just wait for fate to kind of take the reins for me? Or am I going to go out and do things and maybe try and like maybe find someone, or just try and like experience what I can in this short bit of time that I have left? And kind of in that same time frame, she meets a guy named Damien, and she feels like this weird draw towards him. Like she likes him, but she has to deal with this kind of internal conflict of like morals. Like, she's kept it a secret from pretty much everyone in her life except for her her parents, but she's kind of has to deal with this moral dilemma of, do I tell him, do I pursue this relationship with him? And amidst all of that internal conflict, she learns a little bit more about him, and she gets pulled into this world that kind of like exists in the shadows of our world, and that there is like she learns about this magic and monsters, and Damien is kind of like just kind of all tied into it. And she kind of learns that her illness might not be what she thinks it is, and that there might be more to her than she believes or knows.
Ooh, very, very intriguing. I like this a lot. I'm very excited for this. And so what inspired this?
So I actually started writing this book when I was in high school, and it was, of course, originally inspired by the Black Dagger Brotherhood series. I was Twilight fan, Black Dagger Brotherhood, vampires, like, or like 2009 was the year that I graduated. And so like that was like vampires were the huge thing, and I never stopped loving vampires. But I started writing that book, and it kind of got put down, and then I revisited it, and obviously now as an adult it was like my mind worked completely different, and I had all these new ideas. And then I was like, ooh, what if we had like I can't say it without giving it away, but I'm like, what if we add in, like, we have some of that Greek influence, that Greek mythology, and then we add in all of these different concepts and tropes. And that was like, tropes, oh my goodness, tropes. So like I kind of pulled in like some of the tropes that I've got in this book is, of course, soulmates. As expected, right person, not enough time.
Yes.
Of course, we got to have the toucher and you die.
Yeah.
Dark hair, morally gray love interest, emotional scars, found family, starved for touch, dark secret. And that's like, I'm just really, really excited because like there's so many things. And then of course I read The Court of Thorns and Roses, and got a lot of inspiration from that, and how like it really just absolutely gets you attached, and then just the characters go through all this conflict and trouble and like turmoil and stuff, and it just kind of gets you really into it. And so that was, I feel like those are like the two big major influences and inspirations for this series.
That is awesome. It's nice to have another person who was inspired by SJM work. That's what mine was inspired
I
by.
have to give because I had never ever heard of any of her books until I joined Book Talk back in January.
Mhm.
And it was around that time that I had picked up the book and revisited it and started completely rewriting it. And it went from originally being a standalone, very simple story to a 4-book series that the original story didn't have any Greek mythology in it. It was just boy meets girl, fall in love, yada yada. Now it's so much more complex.
That is really awesome. I like that. I love the sources of inspiration, and I can't wait. It sounds so intriguing. So you told us a little bit about your writing journey. Were you always a writer? Did it start before high school, or was it mostly in high school that it started?
So it was mostly in high school. I used to do back in high school, they had this thing called RPing, or role playing, where you basically wrote down in a journal. And I have to giggle because like I see like these books that are written by multiple authors, like the Zodiac Academy and things like that. And I'm like, that's basically what I did back in high school, where you would basically how you would have a character and your friend would have a character, and you would basically write out your character's actions, and then your friend would respond back with her character's reactions, and it just kind of builds a
Yeah.
story and such. And I read a lot of fan fiction, and of course books. Read a lot of books back in high school, but that, I feel like that was kind of where all of that started. And then whenever I graduated high school and life just kind of happened, I honestly kind of stopped, and I didn't touch it or pick it up until earlier this year.
Gotcha. Well, that's good. I'm glad that you did. That's really exciting. And then, okay, so since there's a romance in it, how much spice are we talking?
Okay, so I know that everyone rates their spice level kind of differently, but on a scale of 5 chili peppers, my story, I feel like falls right around like 3 chili peppers. Like it's descriptive, but I feel like that's kind of like the closest. Like,
Okay, no, that's totally fine. I feel like, so it sounds like you do it similar to how I do, where it's like there's spice and there's graphic scenes, but it's not like the whole story.
It's not the whole story. No, it's like there's I giggle because I always joke and say it's plot with spice. Just a dash of spice.
Yeah.
It's just the right
like
amount.
a nice little serving. Like,
yes.
you're just like, let's just throw some of that in there.
Satisfaction.
Yes. So what is your writing process like? Are you a plotter, pantser?
So I giggle because I lovingly refer to myself as a planster. A little bit heavier on the plotting side, because I do, of course, I mean, I have all 4 books basically plotted out. I know how the series is going to end. I know what's going to generally happen in each book. And whenever I start writing one book, I will kind of lay out a general timeline of like key things. And then I'll start writing and I'll start to follow that. And then something will happen and my characters will go, whoop.
Yeah.
We're going on a tangent. And I'm like, okay, all right, I like this tangent. Let's go, a tangent. And then we'll come back and then we'll be like, all right, okay, we did the tangent, now back on track. So that's kind of how it ends up working out with me.
Totally understandable. That's similar to me. I try and it's like herding cats. Like you do so much.
It is.
We can do so much. Like we have the outline, we know where we want to go, but it's like, are they going to listen today? Are they not? We'll see. Like
right, we might go on some little swirly off the track,
yeah,
take the road less traveled, and then end up back at the main road, and then maybe dip off again. But we'll end up at the final destination. It just takes a little bit.
Exactly. But it's plenty of places for us to have our characters grow and go through plenty of emotional turmoil. So,
Yes.
because we
Nothing
all
like trauma.
yes, right. What would be a book without it?
It is
Um,
necessary for character development.
it is. It is, unfortunately for our characters. Probably hate us at the end of this.
Oh, mine does. Mine do. Mine hate me.
So, what was one of the biggest struggles you felt like with of Shadow and Moonlight?
Oh, goodness gracious. Lay it on me, Haley. I feel like one of the biggest struggles for me would okay, there's two. I'm going to give you two. Imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome has been a major struggle for me, but I've kind of just been like trudging along with the imposter syndrome, grabbing onto my ankles and just making me absolutely fight tooth and nail. And then editing. Editing was like, oh my gosh, it was like literally like just nails on a chalkboard. I've read this manuscript a million times over, and I had to set it down. Like I sent it off to my editor and I was like, okay, good. I can stop looking at this for like a few weeks. And then she sends it back to me in 2 weeks. I'm like, no, I don't want to look at this for at least another couple weeks.
That's so
But
funny.
I think those were my two biggest struggles.
Yeah. No, both are so hard to deal with. I think imposter syndrome it's such an ongoing battle, and it's so hard to some days are easier than others, and it's some days you have it like you'll be like fully confident and you'll be like, yeah, I am a great writer, I am awesome, I am doing this, and then it's like one thing happens and you're just like, I'm done, I'm gonna go hide under a rock. So
Right. Like for me, one of the biggest things was I would, and I know we're always like, don't play the comparison game. Don't, it's the same across all, like it's the same across all, like I do photography for a living. So like the whole thing, don't do the comparison game. But I would like read my writing and I'd be like, this sounds pretty good. This sounds pretty good. And then I'd read like a high fantasy book or something. And I'd be like, oh, but this is like so good. Like, are people gonna want to read this? Like, this isn't like,
yeah.
oh, people are gonna be like, her writing's not poetic. There's no flowery prose. And I'm like, but then like some people are like, it sounds good. And I'm like, but does it though? Does
Oh,
it?
I'm sure it's amazing. I can't wait for it just based off of what you've told me. So I'm sure it's amazing.
No,
um,
I will say I got a really big boost of confidence the other night. I did a live with 5 other creators, and there was this male narrator in the live who offered to read an excerpt, a scene from my book. And so I was like, oh gosh, okay, all right, what scene should I do? Pick the scene. And it was so funny because we're all sitting there listening, like just staring and listening and watching all of the others' reactions and reading the comments as it's going through. Like I cried at the end because I was like, I didn't think that I didn't think that people would like it, but you guys are liking it. Thank you.
that's amazing. I love that. That is awesome. I'm so glad that you had that moment and that like that confidence boost. That's amazing.
It helped tremendously.
That. So do you have a favorite character, supporting or main, whoever, one that just kind of is closest to your heart?
Oh my gosh. See, I have 3.
Tell us all about them.
Okay, so obviously, of course, my first is of course Cass, the main character. And she's like very near and dear to my heart because to me, I'm a little neurodivergent. I I've suffered my life with some trauma of my own, and I may or may not have what's the word, projected onto her, just because of the way that she acts. Like especially there is at the beginning of the book, she's she's insecure. She feels like no one wants to talk to me. Like I'm nobody who wants to take time to get to know me. And she apologizes for things and she feels like she's an inconvenience. But she, over the course of the book, kind of starts to come out of her shell and work through those things. And so I feel like for her, like she's my favorite because she's kind of relatable to me personally. And I hope that some other readers will find her relatable as well. My second favorite, of course, is Damien, just purely because of how he's very supportive, and yet at the same time firm with others. Like she is like, he puts her on a pedestal and basically it's how do I describe him like without giving away too much? He dotes on her, and he like supports her, but he will turn around, like he'll have her back, like no matter what. He is always going to have her back. And just reading how he reacts and does things to her, it gets me giddy and happy. And then my third, because like there's no like tier, like they're all kind of on the same level of favorite. The other character is Barrett, and he's a main character, but he's like just a step below Cassie and Damien. And so Barrett is like can I use language on here? Okay. So he's kind of a hard ass. He's like the big brother who will pick on you and push your buttons. But if someone so much as says something wrong to you or about you, he will put them in their place like no tomorrow. And in the second book, he's more the first, where he's like pushes her buttons, acts like a big brother, annoys the absolute crap out of her. He has this nickname for her. He calls her Spitfire, and she hates it. But in the second book, she starts to see this other side of him as she gets closer. She's like, "You're actually really cool. Like you've got my back." Like what? And I feel like that's kind of where the found family comes in. But I think that's kind of why he's my other favorite.
Sounds like a sweetheart. I cannot wait to meet him. So do you have a favorite scene or a favorite quote or something that, without being too spoilery, that you can I know that's hard.
No, it is so hard. So I think my favorite scene would have to be so something happens in the book and it really freaks Cassie out. And she can't sleep, and she's in her house, and it's like 2 a.m, and she hears the sound outside, and it totally freaks her out. And she's like, I can't be alone, but I'm too scared to go outside to go next door to my neighbor. Like, who do I call at 2 a.m? And she's like, I can't call my best friend because she doesn't know about the situation that's got her so freaked out. And she's like, I'm not bringing it up now. And then she remembers that Damien, who knew about the situation, was like, call me. Doesn't matter, anytime, even if it's just to talk, call me. And she calls him, or she texts him. She texts him, and she's like, he's probably asleep. The phone's probably on vibrate. He's not going to see it. If he doesn't see it, that's okay. And then at the same time, she's like, did you really just text him in the middle of the night over a sound outside? You were such a baby. And then like, it's not even seconds after she's texted him that her phone rings and he's calling her. And he's like, is everything okay? And she's like internally screaming like, no, everything's not okay. I'm freaking out. I'm having a panic attack. I need a distraction. Like I don't want to be alone. And she's just like, and he's like, are you okay? And she's like, she's just kind of like that. She kind of just like, he sees it. He hears it in her voice, and he's like, do you want me to come over? And she's like, no, you don't have to do that. I don't want to bother you. And she's like, I feel bad enough waking you. He's like, you didn't wake me. It's not a problem. I'll be over there. Like, if you want me to come over there, I can come over. And it's just like,
oh, I love that. I like that. That's awesome. Reminds me of my husband at one point. So I like that. So I think Wow, we flew through those. That was fun. We got through those quick. So yeah, again, thank you guys. Thank you so much for being on today. I had so much fun talking to you and chatting about Of Shadow and Moonlight. Can you give us an idea of when it's releasing?
So it is, by the time this is released, it will be shared. It is set to release November 29th of this year, 2022. And actually pre-orders are up at barnesandnoble.com. And that's really, really exciting. I can't believe it's actually like, it's like, oh my gosh, it's happening. It's happening.
Yeah. You're coming down the home stretch. That is awesome.
I'm so nervous. I've never been more terrified and excited in the same sense.
I absolutely, completely understand. It is the most, people ask how the self-publishing journey is. And like, as it gets closer, you're like, I'm excited and I'm terrified. Like,
yeah. You're like, it's happening too fast. Like it was like dragging on. You were like, when is this gonna finally come? And now that it's getting closer, you're like, no, okay, no, that came too fast. No.
I completely understand. That is so accurate. But again, thank you so much for being on. I absolutely loved chatting with you today. It was awesome.
I had such a wonderful time. I'm so glad that we got to do this. It was so wonderful meeting you.
It was so nice meeting you too, and I can't wait to have you back on in the future.
Yes, I can't wait.
Thank you. And you guys, thank you so much for watching the Witches and Prose podcast. We will see you next time.